All right, I'm gonna make an assumption and I'll stop the meeting in 2 minutes if Judge Peterson doesn't join us, but for the sake of getting going, I'm gonna call this meeting to order. Let's do, Sarah, will you just run through really quick for our guests who's at the table?
Sure. So, yep, here's Judge Peterson coming on. So I'm Sarah Benedict, the Criminal Justice Coordinator Director. We've got Chris Corpola, our DHS Director, CJCC Chair. We've got Sheriff Kevin Bigd. We've got Chief Eric Atkinson. We've got Andrea Nodolf. She's our CJCC Vice Chair and District Attorney by phone. We have Christina Meyer, judge. We've got Judge Wagner. We've got Judge Peterson. We've got Clerk of Court Katie Shalley. And we've got County Board Supervisor and Judiciary and Law Committee Chair, John Calabrese. Looks like we're getting a couple more joining. We've got County Board Chair Supervisor Kelly McCullough coming on. And we've got Caitlin Engel with the public health coming on. And then in addition, we have two guests today. We've got Alicia Nichols and David Keck with a Battered Women's Project. So that's our roster. I think I've called everybody.
Did you catch John Lundeen?
Oh, John Lundeen by phone. Thank you. Yes, I forgot him. Got him down on paper, but forgot to announce him. And then others may join us, and I will make note of that as they come in.
Okay. I would entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from the May 11th meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Sheriff Bigd, second by Chief Atkinson.
Yes, please.
Any discussion? Otherwise, all those in favor of approving those minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Public comment? I don't believe that we have any public. So we will move forward with the firearms surrender process mapping.
All right, and at this point, I think we're going to turn it over to Chief and to our two technical experts, Alicia and Dave, to help facilitate us through this conversation, and hopefully by the end of it, we'll have a clear understanding of a process that we might want to adopt.
And just before we
go ahead.
Just before we do that, Alicia, Sarah, would you just do a 1 minute? What kind of how I know this group was here for the discussion about this, but how we decided to use this meeting for this purpose?
Sure. And then really quickly, Sarah, if I could, only because it pertains to, I believe our intern is waiting in the waiting room. Her name is Madeline, if you see her come through.
Okay, I don't see her in the waiting room. Can you forward her the
Yep, I just sent it to her. She was in the other meeting. Yep, I just sent it. Thank you.
So briefly, just to get everybody on the same page, the Battered Women's Project reached out to us here in Menominee, Dunn County, regarding a project where they're helping local jurisdictions map the firearm surrender. Wisconsin has some good laws in place, but we don't always have that process in place. So we, at our last executive meeting, were presented with an opportunity to take advantage of this really kind of gift coming to us as far as looking at how we can shore up our firearm surrender, especially when we're talking about potential victims of domestic violence. So at the executive meeting, we did approve that we wanted to go forward with this. We had some planning meetings with Chief Atkinson and with the staff at the Battered Women's Project, and we were looking for a date in June to get all these folks together that we have at the table today. So we really, instead of having another meeting in 2 weeks, really just took this opportunity, since we're here, we're ready to go, to really introduce this topic and see how far we can get in an hour as far as mapping. So we might have some follow-up meetings after this. We'll have to see how it goes. But really just trying to take advantage of our limited time and move this action ahead. Anything that Chief would like to add, I guess, before we get started?
Not so much, Sarah. I think you really hit the nail on the head. I'm hoping at this meeting here, we can at least start that communication process, because really we do have good statutes on the book. It's just a matter of the courts communicating through clerk of courts and then with law enforcement so we can carry out the orders. And I'm hoping we can shore up that process. And I think we can. It's very doable. Wisconsin's been a progressive state in applying some good domestic violence laws. So hopefully we can get through that and then help protect our victims and prevent future homicides or people suffering from great bodily harm. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Sarah. I don't recall. I think we sent some forms around for you to look at after our last meeting. I don't know if you had a chance to look at those yet, but just by way of just an introduction, I was a court commissioner in Wisconsin. I'm in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, for 10 years. And during that time, I helped develop a protocol for implementing the Wisconsin statute that at that time had been dormant for about 20 years, that required courts to order surrender of firearms in domestic violence protection orders or other protection orders where the court orders surrender firearms. And that's kind of how I got into doing this work. There should be, I mean, we did a webinar last week. I don't know if any of you saw it, kind of talking about authority, the topic of authority and who has authority and who doesn't have authority to seize firearms or order surrender. And Wisconsin doesn't really have that problem because the statute was fairly clear about what obligations there are. The court has the obligation to not only order that surrender, but also follow up on that with in the courtroom with that respondent about the statement of firearms, if it's all accurate. And that goes to the sheriff's department. I'm not sure how in your county that goes to the sheriff, but then there's an order for the sheriff to take those firearms. And I don't know, we may need to talk through, and then how does that message then get relayed back to the court that there has been compliance or not, there has not been compliance. And so the system's fairly well straightforward, but it's difficult to implement sometimes. So my initial question is whether anybody has concerns about the process or has questions about exactly what the obligations are in under Wisconsin law.
So I would just add to, for a point of reference, in the meeting packet, all the forms were included, the Wisconsin forms. There's also a short video showing the Wisconsin process, and then a short video out of Washington, kind of doing more of the explanation process. So that was part of the meeting packet that everybody should have received.
I'm wondering if we could start with when we have an offender that is sentenced and how the judges would operate in that sentencing and guidelines that they would put into place. Because I would imagine that they're part of the surrendering of firearms is part of the sentencing for it, and then talk about how we would communicate that or work that, and maybe start with the judges if we could, if that's possible.
Oh, good question, Eric. I thought we were talking about the restraining orders, so we have the system in place. If somebody gets sentenced for the first time for a felony, I don't know. I mean, we advise them that it'd be unlawful for them to possess a firearm, and that the serious penalties under both state and federal law for that. I think state's a Class G felony, but I don't know that we have any mechanism in place for follow up to for the same way we do with the domestic abuse restraining orders or other restraining orders where firearms surrender is ordered.
Yeah, I think it'd probably be valuable for us to take a look at both the restraining orders on the domestic violence, and then when someone is convicted of domestic violence, I think both of those would be important for us here as it relates to the firearms. And certainly be willing to turn it over to the judges to offer it where you would like to start, or offer at least your insight of what you're doing or seeing from the bench.
Well, again, I have say you have a misdemeanor crime of violence, like a misdemeanor battery, domestic violence, or strangulation, suffocation, false imprisonment. We don't frankly have a system in place to inquire about firearms and order firearm surrender under those circumstances. I mean, I haven't done it. Maybe I'm missing something, but that is an area where, people, once you're convicted of that felony, then possession obviously becomes a crime. And, but I haven't gone through that process. And it's important to remember that a sentencing person has a right to remain silent also. So, but in any event, that's just where it is with that. I mean, I'm real familiar and have done the other system through the restraining orders numerous times on my end of it. And, but in fact, I just had a firearm surrender hearing like a week and a half ago where the person had turned it over to a relative, and I had the hearing, and asking the questions, making sure that person was legal. That guy actually turned the firearms over to his half brother before the hearing for the restraining order. So, but I haven't, most of the restraining orders I've had that I can remember recently in the last, year or so, most of the people either testified that they did not have firearms, or that, many of them have been convicted felons, couldn't possess firearms anyway. So
that's good to hear, Judge, that's in place. You're exactly right. Taking firearms post-conviction has a couple of different challenges to it. The Wisconsin system that's now been used in other states on protection orders.